I never thought I would be the guy whose wife cheated on him. I mean, we had a good life together, or so I thought. My name is Jake, and I've been married to Sarah for 5 years. We live in a pretty decent suburban neighborhood just outside of Chicago, and on the surface, we seemed like any other couple. We had our routines, our favorite restaurants, weekend plans, and the whole 9 yards. But lately, something had felt off. It started with subtle changes. She was more irritable, less interested in our intimate moments, and often had this distracted look in her eyes. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just stressed with her job. Sarah works as a marketing executive, and it's a high-pressure environment. I even tried to be supportive, asking if she needed help or if she wanted to talk. But she always said she was fine, just a little tired. Her friends often claimed she was the fun one in the group, the one who brought the party. But lately, it felt like I was the party that got canceled. One Saturday, I had plans to take her out for dinner, a little date night to rekindle what we had. But when I got home from running some errands, I noticed her car was in the driveway. It was supposed to be a surprise, and I was excited to see her. Instead, when I walked in, I found her sitting on the couch, staring blankly at her phone. She didn't even acknowledge my presence until I cleared my throat. "Hey, babe, ready for our night out?" I said, trying to lift her spirits. "Oh, I'm not really feeling it tonight," she replied without looking up, her voice devoid of enthusiasm. I could feel a knot tightening in my stomach as I tried to salvage the situation. "Come on, let's just grab a bite. We can go to that new Italian place you wanted to try." She rolled her eyes. "Jake, I just want to relax tonight. Can you drop it?" The tone was sharp, and I felt a heat rising in my cheeks. This was not the Sarah I knew. I dropped it, but the doubt started to grow in my mind. A few weeks later, I had a business trip planned. It was supposed to be a quick 2-day conference, and Sarah had promised to stay in touch. I figured it would give her some time to miss me, to remember how much fun we could have together. But every time I called, she seemed distracted, or she'd make excuses about being busy. Then came the night I would stumble upon the truth. I returned home a day early, excited to surprise her. As I approached the front door, I noticed several cars parked on our street that didn't belong to any of our neighbors. My heart started racing, and I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. I opened the door quietly, not wanting to ruin anything, and that's when I heard it. Laughter, loud and unmistakably hers, echoing from the living room. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The sight that welcomed me was everything I feared. Sarah, sprawled on the couch, her legs draped over another man while they watched some stupid reality show. I blinked hard, thinking maybe I was imagining things, but nope, there she was, laughing, flirting, and completely oblivious to my presence. I don't remember much from that moment, just the overwhelming rush of betrayal. I felt the air leave the room, and I was suddenly frozen. It was like I was watching a bad movie, but this was my life. What happened next was a blur. I mustered whatever strength I had left and burst into the living room, my voice breaking the spell. "What the hell is going on here?" Sarah's head snapped towards me, and the look on her face was a cocktail of shock and guilt. She scrambled to sit up, her expression shifting from surprise to panic as she realized her secret was out. "Jake, I can explain." She stammered, but I didn't want to hear it. The man on the couch, a guy named Mark who I didn't recognize, looked as if he wanted to disappear. I could feel my pulse racing, and before I knew it, I shouted, "Get the hell out." Mark quickly scrambled off the couch, slipping on his shoes, and bolted past me. I could hardly focus on him, my eyes were locked on Sarah. "Jake, listen," she began, her voice shaky. I cut her off. "No, you listen to me. How could you do this?" Her excuses started pouring out. How she was bored, how I was too wrapped up in work, how Mark was just a friend who understood her. All the while, I felt the walls close in around me. Each justification was like a dagger twisting and turning in my gut. She was trying to paint me as the villain in this terrible story, and all I could do was stand there, feeling the weight of her betrayal crush me. I had a million emotions swirling inside of me: anger, sadness, confusion. But mostly, I just felt empty. I had to make sense of this chaos. As the shock began to fade, I realized I wanted revenge. Not just any revenge, but the kind that would leave a mark on her. something that would show her that she couldn't just walk all over me and expect to get away with it. I wanted to make sure she would remember this moment, remember what she had lost. But for now, I just stood there, staring at her as she tried to explain herself. I could feel my heart breaking, piece by piece, and I knew this was only the beginning of a long, painful journey. To be continued. The confrontation hung in the air like a dense fog thick with unresolved feelings and a cacophony of accusations. I could see Sarah's eyes darting around, trying to gauge my reaction. Her cheeks flushed a deep crimson as she stammered through her excuses, but I was having none of it. "You were bored," I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "That's your reason for cheating. You couldn't have talked to me, told me how you felt. Instead, you go behind my back with some stranger." Sarah opened her mouth, likely preparing to hit me with another excuse, but I cut her off. "No, no more lies. You've made your choice. I want you to think long and hard about what you've done." I turned on my heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind me. The cool evening air hit my face like a splash of cold water, grounding me in reality. I paced back and forth on our front porch, feeling an array of emotions swirl inside me. Anger, betrayal, and something that felt disturbingly like sadness washed over me in waves. I was furious at Sarah, but I was also heartbroken. The woman I had loved, trusted, had shattered that bond in an instant. After a while, I stumbled into my car, my mind racing. I needed to clear my head, and the best way I knew how was to drive. I ended up at a nearby park, one I used to visit as a kid. The familiar sights and sounds wrapped around me like a warm blanket, but it did little to ease my turmoil. I sat in my car, staring at the trees swaying in the wind, and let my thoughts drift. How could she do this? We had built a life together. I thought we were happy. Was it really that easy for her to toss it aside because she felt bored? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I imagined how she must feel with Mark, laughing, sharing secrets, and probably sharing a bed. The thought made my blood boil. It was infuriating and devastating all at once. I decided I needed to confront her again, but this time it wouldn't be about yelling or accusations. I wanted to get under her skin, make her regret her decision. I needed a plan, something that would show her that her actions had consequences. The next day, I went to work, but my head was far from focused. I barely touched my emails or participated in meetings. Instead, my mind was preoccupied with thoughts of revenge, of how I could turn the tables. I started drafting a plan in my head. It couldn't be hasty. It had to be calculated, something that would hurt her deeply but wouldn't drag me down to her level. I began by gathering information about Mark, the man who had stepped into my life like a thief in the night. With a little digging, I found out where he worked and what he did. He was a personal trainer at a well-known gym, the kind where fitness buffs went to sculpt the perfect body. That was a detail I could use. I thought about how I could exploit this new knowledge. How could I turn this into a weapon? I decided to hit the gym and see what all the fuss was about. I signed up for a membership under a different name, just a regular dude looking to get in shape. I figured I could blend in and maybe run into Mark during one of his sessions with clients. The first day at the gym was overwhelming. I had no idea how to navigate the equipment, let alone the people. But I pushed through, focusing on my goal. Every time I lifted weights or ran on the treadmill, I felt a little stronger, a little more in control. I was taking charge of my life again, even if just in the small ways that felt monumental after such a betrayal. After a few sessions, I finally spotted Mark, charismatic and confident, working with a group of clients. He was everything I wasn't in that moment: fit, outgoing, and seemingly perfect. I could feel a fire ignite within me as I looked at him. This was the man who had taken my wife from me, and I needed to seize that anger and use it to my advantage. It wasn't long before I figured out how to approach him. I started casually chatting with the trainers, getting to know the gym culture, and eventually I worked my way into a conversation with Mark. I kept it light, pretending to be just another gym-goer looking to improve my fitness. We exchanged pleasantries, and I could see the glimmer of recognition in his eyes. He didn't know who I was, but the tension was palpable. As our conversations became more frequent, I learned so much more about him and his relationship with Sarah. I found out they had been seeing each other for a few months, and he was under the impression that their connection was something special. Each new detail only fueled my anger, but it also solidified my resolve. I began to formulate how I would play my cards. I wanted Sarah to feel the weight of her choices, to see the contrast between the life we built and the chaos she had chosen. I needed to orchestrate a situation that would make her question everything. I didn't want to just end things. I wanted her to truly understand what she had thrown away. Back at home, Sarah seemed to be in denial about the gravity of the situation. She was still trying to act as if everything was normal, often sending me texts asking when we could talk. I ignored her messages, letting her stew in her own guilt. Each time she reached out, I felt a sense of empowerment. The stage was set. I was ready to take my revenge and watch as her world unraveled. Little did she know that the man she had betrayed would not only rise from the ashes but would also become a more formidable version of himself. To be continued. As I continued my operation at the gym, I found myself slipping into two roles. By day, I was Jake, the betrayed husband, and by night, I transformed into a man on a mission, plotting revenge. The duality of my existence felt strangely empowering. I could feel the anger coursing through me, and it fueled my workouts. Each time I pushed myself to the limit, I reminded myself that this was for me, for my dignity, and for the life I deserved. Meanwhile, Sarah kept reaching out, often trying to initiate conversations that felt forced and awkward. The tension in our home became palpable. I could sense her anxiety. She was clearly unraveling, and I was savoring every minute of it. One evening, as I was getting ready for another session at the gym, she approached me in the living room, her voice tentative. "Jake, can we talk? Like, really talk?" I turned to face her, the facade I had built for revenge still fresh. In my mind, "What do you want to talk about, Sarah? The affair? The guy you chose over me?" Her face fell, and I could see the guilt etched into her features. "I know I messed up, but I'm not the only one to blame. You've been distant too. You never pay attention to me anymore." I needed excitement, Jake. I was bored. The words cut deep, but they also stoked the fire inside me. This was what I had been waiting for. I wasn't going to be her punching bag anymore, and I wasn't going to let her play the victim in this story. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Excitement, is that what you call it? You turn our life into a joke because you were bored. You think this is just a game for me." She shifted uneasily, her eyes darting to the floor. "I didn't mean it like that. I wanted to feel something again. I want us to work, Jake. Can't we figure this out?" I shook my head. "You had your chance when you decided to sleep with someone else. You don't get to rewrite the narrative just because you're feeling guilty now." I could feel her frustration building, but I didn't care. I wanted to see how far I could push her, how desperate she would become. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but reflect on how this situation had transformed me. I was no longer the submissive husband, willing to overlook Sarah's flaws to maintain some semblance of peace. Instead, I was filled with resolve and determination. I was going to show her the consequences of her actions, and I was going to do it in a way she wouldn't see coming. The next day, I returned to the gym, and I finally decided to make my move. I arranged to meet Mark for a drink, casually suggesting it after one of our gym sessions. There was an ease in the way he spoke to me. He seemed to think we were becoming friends. I played my role well, making him feel comfortable, even suggesting we should hang out outside of the gym. When the day arrived, I picked a trendy bar close to the gym, a place that was bustling with energy. I wanted to set the tone for how the evening would go. As I waited for him to show up, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This was the moment I had been working toward, confronting him while still keeping my composure. When Mark walked in, he looked relaxed and confident, the kind of guy who could charm anyone. We exchanged pleasantries, and I could see that he had no idea what was about to unfold. After a few drinks and casual banter about fitness and life, I decided to steer the conversation towards Sarah. "So how long have you and Sarah been seeing each other?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. He chuckled, clearly proud of himself. "Oh, a few months. She's something special, you know. We have a real connection. I think she's starting to feel trapped in her marriage, though." Those words struck me like a punch to the gut. "Trapped, huh?" I said, leaning in, pretending to be intrigued. Well, it's funny you say that because she's still my wife. His expression faltered and the color drained from his face. What do you mean? I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension build. I mean she's still married to me, and you're the guy who decided to step in and take my place while I was out busting my ass at work. Mark shifted uncomfortably, and I could see the realization dawning on him. I continued, "You think you have something special with her. You need to think again. She's just using you as a distraction, something to fill the void she created." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "You really think you can just waltz in and take my life without consequences? Her boredom is not your excuse to cheat with my wife." The tension was thick in the air, and I could see his facade cracking. "Jake, I didn't know. She didn't tell me you were still together," he stammered, his confidence slipping away. "Well, now you know," I replied, relishing the moment. "Maybe you should think about your next move because this isn't over yet." I left the bar feeling exhilarated. I had served Mark a dose of reality, and I was ready to bring this confrontation home to Sarah. She needed to see the repercussions of her choices, not just for me but for her as well. The more I plotted my revenge, the more clarity I found within myself. When I got home, I found Sarah sitting on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone. I could see her scrolling through social media, but she looked lost in thought. It took everything in me to keep my expression neutral as I walked in. "Hey," I said casually, but I could feel the tension in the air shift. She looked up, and I could tell she sensed that something was different about me. "Hey, how was the gym?" she asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "Great," I replied, a small smirk creeping across my face. "I had a drink with Mark after our session." Her expression changed instantly, anxiety flickered across her face. "Oh, you did?" I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms, letting the silence stretch between us. "Yeah, we had a really enlightening conversation." "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I stepped closer, locking eyes with her. "Let's just say I think Mark is starting to realize that being with you might not be such a great idea after all." Her eyes widened, and I could see the panic rising within her. She was starting to understand that I was no longer the passive husband she could manipulate. "What did you tell him?" she pressed. "Oh, just the truth, that you're still married and you decided to cheat because you were bored." He seemed shocked, which is a good start. The color drained from her face. "Jake, you can't just go around telling people that. It's not fair." "Not fair," I echoed, my voice rising. "You think it's fair that you decided to destroy our marriage because you felt bored? You think I'm going to let this slide without any consequences? I'm not the one who should be worried about fairness here." Her expression shifted from panic to anger. "You're being vindictive, Jake. You can't do this." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my own feelings. "You did this to yourself, Sarah. You made your bed and now you're going to lie in it." For the first time since the affair came to light, I felt a sense of control, a rush of power. I was no longer just the hurt husband. I was the man who would make her face the reality of her choices. The air between us thickened with tension as I prepared for her response, knowing that this was just the beginning of a much darker chapter in our lives. To be continued. The tension in the room was almost suffocating, thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah's expression morphed from anger to desperation, and I could see the gears turning in her mind as she tried to grasp the implications of what I had just revealed. Her earlier bravado was rapidly evaporating, leaving behind a woman who suddenly felt cornered. "Jake, please don't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "You're only hurting yourself this way. Can't we just talk about it? I'll explain everything, I swear." I held up my hand to silence her, my own emotions swirling in a tempest. "What's there to explain? You chose to cheat on me. You made your decision and now you're facing the fallout. You can't just act like everything is fine when it's clearly not." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. But then I remembered Mark, the infidelity, the lies, and the betrayal. "You betrayed the trust that held our marriage together," I said, my voice steady but full of hurt. "And now you want me to forgive you just like that? It's not going to happen." "Jake, I never wanted to hurt you," she pleaded, her desperation palpable. "It just happened. I was confused and I thought I could find something exciting again. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Confused?" I scoffed, shaking my head in disbelief. You didn't just get confused, you made a conscious choice to sleep with someone else. That's not a mistake, it's a betrayal. And now you want to make it my problem. Her tears streamed down her cheeks, and for the first time I saw a glimpse of the woman I had fallen in love with. But beneath that veneer of vulnerability lay the reality of her actions, and I couldn't let myself be swayed. I had to stay strong for my own sake. I can't believe you knew what you were doing, and still chose to do it, I said, my voice low but firm. You had every opportunity to come to me to talk about your feelings, but instead you chose the easy path with him. Jake, I know I messed up. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll go to therapy. We can work through this together, she said, her voice rising with desperation. I love you and I want to make it right. I felt a flicker of doubt wash over me. Could I really trust her again? Did I even want to? I took a step back, running a hand through my hair as I tried to process everything. You say you love me, but love doesn't hurt someone like this. You can't just throw around those words and expect them to make everything okay. She took a shaky breath, wiping her tears away. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to show you that I can change. This isn't who I am. I shook my head slowly, feeling the weight of the decision resting heavily on my shoulders. You've already shown me who you are, Sarah. You've shown me that you're willing to throw away everything we've built because you were bored. Please, just give me a chance to prove myself, she begged, stepping closer, her eyes earnest. I don't want to lose you. I can be better, I swear. But even as I looked into her eyes, I felt the anger boiling just beneath the surface. I had spent years building a life with her, investing in our dreams and future, and she had decided to throw it all away for a fleeting thrill. You know, you've made this so much easier for me, I said finally, letting the resolve wash over me. I thought I could forgive you, but now I see you're not the person I thought I knew. Her expression faltered, and I could see the realization that this wasn't just a momentary fight. This was the tipping point in our relationship. I continued, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. And right now, I don't want to. I have to think about my own future, too. The weight of my words hung in the air, and I could see her heart shatter before my eyes. I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. I had to stay true to my decision. My own healing had to come first, even if it meant causing her pain. Jake, she whispered, but I could see the fight leaving her. She looked defeated, and I knew I had to follow through. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. I think it's best if we take some time apart. We can figure things out once we've both had a chance to reflect. Take time apart, she echoed, her voice shaky. Are you really going to throw everything away just like that? It's not just me throwing things away. You did that when you chose to cheat. You don't get to rewrite this narrative, I said sharply. This is about protecting myself now. She let out a defeated sigh. I can't believe this is happening. I never wanted it to end like this. It doesn't have to end, I said, trying to soften my voice. But it can't go on like this. Not until we both understand what's at stake. I gathered my things, feeling a mix of sadness and empowerment coursing through me. I needed to leave the house for a while to clear my head and find some semblance of normalcy in the chaos. As I walked towards the door, I could feel Sarah's eyes on me, filled with desperation and regret. Jake, please, she called after me, her voice breaking. I will do anything to make this right. Just don't walk away. I hesitated at the door, my hand on the knob. I could feel my heart aching, but I knew I had to stick to my decision. Take care of yourself, Sarah, I said softly, and with that I stepped out into the night. The air was cool and the stars twinkled in the sky as I drove away from the home we had shared. Each mile felt like a step toward reclaiming my life, but at the same time, it felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind. I had so much to process, and the road ahead felt uncertain. I drove to the park where I had spent so many nights reflecting, and as I sat in my car, I allowed the tears to flow. I felt vulnerable and raw, but I also felt a strength emerging from the pain. This was my opportunity to regain control over my life, to redefine what my future would look like. In that moment of solitude, I realized that I wasn't just grieving the loss of my marriage. I was also shedding the parts of myself that had allowed Sarah to push me down. I was reclaiming my identity, and I needed to carry that forward. As I sat there, I thought about my next steps. I needed to focus on healing, on rediscovering who I was without Sarah. I would take my time to process everything and figure out what I truly wanted moving forward. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to embrace the challenges. I was determined to come out stronger on the other side, ready to build a future that was not just empty and boring but filled with purpose and connection. To be continued. Days turned into weeks, and the initial shock of Sarah's betrayal began to settle into a painful but familiar rhythm. The first few nights after I left were the hardest. I found myself staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment leading up to that fateful confrontation. I didn't just miss her, I missed the life we had built together. Yet, as painful as it was, I also felt a sense of liberation. I had spent so long trying to keep the peace, to mitigate conflict at the cost of my own happiness. Now, I was finally prioritizing myself. I threw myself into work, pouring my energy into projects that I had let slip while trying to be the supportive husband. I started hitting the gym regularly, finding solace in the physical exertion. It became my therapy, a way to channel my hurt into something constructive. The more I focused on myself, the more clarity I began to find. But of course, I couldn't completely escape the reality of my situation. Sarah continued to reach out, sending me texts filled with apologies and pleas for another chance. I often read them but didn't respond. I had to give myself space to breathe, to think without her voice echoing in my mind. I found comfort in the silence, realizing how much I had previously allowed her to dictate my emotions. One evening I was at the gym mid-workout when I spotted Mark again. He was there with a group of friends, laughing and joking, and for a moment I felt that familiar surge of anger rise within me. I was about to turn away when he caught my eye. Instead of avoiding him, I decided to confront him head-on. After all, I had already confronted Sarah. He deserved the same treatment. "Mark," I called out, striding over confidently. The group turned to look at me and I could see the surprise on his face as he stood up. "Can we talk?" Sure," he said hesitantly, glancing at his friends before stepping away from the group. "Let's take this outside," I suggested, wanting to keep the conversation private. Once we were outside, the cool evening air felt refreshing against my skin. "So, how's it going with Sarah?" I asked, my tone casual but laced with an edge. Mark looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Look, man, I didn't know you two were still together. I don't want any trouble," he said, his tone defensive. "Trouble?" I laughed dryly. "You've already caused enough trouble, don't you think?" I took a moment to compose myself, focusing on what I wanted to say. "You need to understand that you're not just some fling to her. You think you're special, but she's using you as a distraction while she figures things out. You're not the first, and you won't be the last." He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "You need to think long and hard about what you're getting into. If you're smart, you'll walk away before you end up in deeper than you can handle." The words felt satisfying as they rolled off my tongue, a way to assert my presence in a situation that had left me feeling powerless for so long. Mark's face fell, the bravado fading. "I didn't mean to hurt you, man. I genuinely like her, you know. She said things weren't good between you two." "Of course she did," I said, my voice low and measured. "You think she's going to tell you the truth? She's just trying to make herself feel better. You're a temporary fix, a way for her to escape the reality of her life." He looked conflicted and I could see the wheels turning in his head. "I'll think about what you said," he replied finally, though I could see that doubt lingered in his eyes. "Good," I replied simply. "You should, and if you have any respect for me or our past, you'll do the right thing." With that, I turned and walked away, feeling a rush of empowerment. I didn't know if my words would resonate with Mark, but at that moment, it felt good to reclaim my narrative. I was no longer the victim. I was the one taking charge. As the days continued to pass, I focused on rebuilding my life. I started hanging out with friends more, going to happy hours, and reconnecting with people I hadn't seen in ages. It felt invigorating to be part of a social scene again, even if it was bittersweet without Sarah. I found myself laughing more, enjoying the moments, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was genuinely living. But there were still nights when the weight of loss hit me like a freight train. I would sit in my apartment, surrounded by silence, and feel the ache in my chest. The moments I shared with Sarah, The late-night talks, the laughter, the plans for the future played over and over in my mind, and I would often wonder if I could ever forgive her. Then one night, as I was scrolling through my phone, a message from Sarah popped up. I hesitated, my heart racing as I read the words. It was an apology, but it felt deeper this time. "I've had time to think, and I realize how selfish I've been. I miss you, and I'm so sorry for everything. I want to make it right. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Can we meet?" A part of me wanted to respond, to engage, to hear her out, but another part of me recognized the importance of maintaining my distance. I had worked hard to find my footing, and I didn't want to jeopardize that by jumping back into the chaos. I took a few moments to gather my thoughts, then typed out a response. "I need more time, Sarah. I'm not sure if I can ever see things the same way again. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk." The decision felt heavy, but it was also liberating. I didn't have to rush into anything. I could take my time to decide what I truly wanted. If anything, this experience had taught me the importance of self-worth and boundaries. The next few days were a whirlwind of thoughts, but I kept myself busy with work and the gym. I spoke to a friend who had been through a similar situation, and he encouraged me to focus on my own healing before diving back into any conversations with Sarah. It was good advice, and I found strength in knowing I wasn't alone. Then, one afternoon, I received another text from Sarah. "Can we meet tomorrow, just to talk? I promise I'll be completely honest." I stared at the screen, weighing my options. I didn't want to dive back into a relationship that had hurt me so deeply, but part of me was curious. I wanted to hear her side, to see if she had really changed. I decided to accept her invitation, but with the clear understanding that I would go in with my guard up. "Okay, let's meet," I finally replied, "but I need you to be completely honest with me, no more excuses." As I prepared for our meeting, I felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. This was the moment where everything could change, where I could either find closure or be dragged back into the chaos of our past. I knew I had to be ready for whatever Sarah was going to say. It was time to confront the truth. To be continued. The day of our meeting arrived, and I felt a swirl of emotions churning inside me. I had spent the morning in a daze, running through what I wanted to say and how I wanted to handle the conversation. I knew I needed to set boundaries and maintain my resolve, but I was also curious about what Sarah had to say. We agreed to meet at a local coffee shop, a neutral ground where I hoped the atmosphere would soften the tension between us. As I walked in, I spotted her at a corner table, fidgeting with her hands. She looked different, her hair was pulled back, and she wore a simple dress that I had always liked on her. But there was a weight in her eyes that told me she wasn't the confident woman I once knew. "Jake," she said softly as I approached, and I could hear the tremor in her voice. "Sarah," I replied, taking a seat across from her. The silence hung thick between us for a moment, and I could feel the anticipation in the air. "Thank you for coming," she said, the sincerity in her voice cutting through the tension. "I know this is difficult for both of us." I nodded, unsure of how to respond. I had been preparing for this moment, but now that we were finally here, the words eluded me. "You said you wanted to be honest." I prompted gently, wanting to give her the space to speak. She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I've had a lot of time to think about what I did. I realize now how selfish I was and how my actions hurt you. I know I can't take back the betrayal, but I want to be completely honest about everything. No more excuses," she said, her voice quaking. I nodded again, my heart pounding as I prepared myself for the truth I had been seeking. I was bored, yes, but that's not an excuse. I was looking for excitement instead of addressing my own feelings, she continued, her voice faltering. "I thought I could find something outside of our marriage that I was missing. In reality, I was just trying to escape my own insecurities, and I dragged you down with me." The guilt washed over her face like a wave, and I could see the remorse etched in her features. I didn't realize how much I valued our relationship until I was faced with the possibility of losing it. It took this pain for me to finally see how much you mean to me. I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I wanted to believe her. On the other, the scar of betrayal was still fresh. "Sarah," I need to know if you're truly remorseful or if this is just another attempt to get me back. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You've hurt me deeply, and trust doesn't just rebuild itself overnight. I know, and I don't expect you to just forgive me, she replied earnestly. But I want to show you that I can change. I've already started seeing a therapist to work through my issues, to understand what led me to make those choices. I want to be better, not just for myself, but for you if you'll let me. The sincerity in her eyes tugged at something deep within me. I had always known Sarah to be a passionate person, and her willingness to confront her own flaws was a step in the right direction. But I also knew that words were just words. It's going to take time, Sarah. Rebuilding trust is a process, one I'm not sure I'm ready for. I understand, she said, her tone steady. I don't want to pressure you. I just want you to know that I'm committed to doing the work. Whether that's with you or on my own, I want to change. I've taken you for granted for too long. As I listened, I felt the battle within me continuing, a war between my desire to protect myself and my instincts to believe in the possibility of change. What if you change and I'm still not ready to forgive? I asked, looking her in the eye. What if this isn't enough? Then I'll accept that and respect your decision, she said, the determination in her voice steady. But I want to try. I miss you, Jake. I miss us. And if there's any chance, no matter how small, I want to fight for it. Her words resonated within me, and I could see the raw vulnerability she was displaying. I still felt the sting of betrayal, but I also felt a flicker of hope. If we're going to consider this, we'll need boundaries, Sarah. I can't go back to the way things were. I need space to think and process everything, I clarified. Whatever you need, I'll respect that, she said, her face softening with understanding. I just want to be honest and give this a real chance, instead of pretending everything is fine. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our conversation hanging between us. I can't promise you that I'll be able to forgive you, but I'm willing to explore the possibility. I finally said, my voice steady. But it will take time, and I need to see genuine effort from you. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief rather than guilt. Thank you, Jake. That's all I can ask for. I'll show you that I can be the partner you deserve. As we finished our coffees, I felt a sense of cautious optimism beginning to blossom within me. There was still a long road ahead, but perhaps this conversation marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for us as a couple, but for myself as well. I understood that I had the power to define the boundaries of our relationship moving forward. I needed to prioritize my own healing while allowing the possibility of forgiveness to grow. It wouldn't be easy, but I felt a spark of determination igniting within me. As we left the cafe, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of our past slowly start to lift. While the journey ahead was uncertain, I knew I was ready to navigate it on my own terms. The pain would still be there, but perhaps, just perhaps, I could rebuild a future that was brighter than the one I had lost. And in that moment, I realized that regardless of the outcome, I was reclaiming my life. And that was the first step to healing.